President Trump drops a bombshell. Project Freedom will be stopped. Agreement or war? Where are we heading? Trump suspended the operation in Hormuz, and in Iran, they celebrated victory and declared that the United States have failed. The President of the United States addressed the regional tension with Iran and said Iran needs to surrender and raise a white flag. United States President Donald Trump announced tonight a dramatic decision to suspend for a short period of time Project Freedom, the American military operation to escort commercial ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump explained the surprising move by pointing to great progress that has been achieved towards a final agreement with the Iranian representatives and noted that the administration intends to examine whether the signing can be completed in the next coming days. So right now, Project Freedom, which is supposed to free the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be suspended for a short time in order to see if the agreement can be completed and signed. And what will happen now? The American Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, spoke yesterday and said that peace between Israel and Lebanon is possible. But the problem is the Hezbollah terrorist organization. And we will bring you all the details very soon. Here in our neighborhood, the Middle East, the decision is causing a lot of anger. It seems that the Revolutionary Guards in Iran succeeded. Is that really the case? I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening of May 6th. The last night it was announced that Epic Fury is over. What does that mean? Only the future will tell us. Just 2 days after it began, the President of the United States announced the suspension of Project Freedom, the operation meant to break the Iranian blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. In a post on Truth, he explained that the decision was made at the request of Pakistan and other countries because of what he described as great progress towards an agreement. In Iran, they boasted and declared victory and stated that the President of the United States had failed. American Secretary of State Marco Rubio called on the Iranian regime to make the logical choice and come to the negotiating table. Rubio called Tehran's leadership insane in the brain, hinting at the well-known hit from the 90s, and made clear that the alternative to an agreement is destruction for them. The alternative is growing isolation, economic collapse, and ultimately, total defeat. This is according to a statement by Rubio. He accused the regime of not caring about the sailors in commercial ships who could travel and who could starve to death in the middle of the sea, and about the global economy that is collapsing because of their actions. The dramatic developments also directly affected the global energy markets. Oil prices, which jumped on Monday following the attacks on the Emirati ports, fell by about 4% on Tuesday after the White House announced about progress in the negotiations. The price of WTI oil closed at $102.27 per barrel, while Brent oil fell to $109.87. American Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth noted that for now, the ceasefire is still holding, but the administration is following every Iranian movement in the area very carefully. The president's announcement came as the peak of the particularly tense week that took place here in the Middle East, which included Iranian missile barrages towards the United Arab Emirates and also a hit on a cargo ship in the Strait, placing the fragile ceasefire under its ultimate test. A deep sense of abandonment surrounds the Gulf capitals following the United States President Donald Trump's decision to turn a blind eye to 3 deadly Iranian attacks and barrages that were aimed at the United Arab Emirates. Amongst the Gulf governments, there is an understanding that The conclusion in Tehran is that military escalation pays off, because Washington is determined to pull itself out of this war, even at the price of abandoning the security of its partners. Is escalation of attacks by Iran an effective tool in order to squeeze the additional concessions from the United States in diplomatic negotiations? In the United States, they are saying publicly that the Iranian attacks on the United Arab Emirates are not grounds to strike Iran, but the alert level remains very high. At the same time, Israel is tightening the security cooperation with the Gulf states and deploying the Iron Dome system to protect the region. And what is happening inside Iran? In the first layer, there is Tehran's new attempt to complete control over the global oil passage. In the shadow of the reports about a ship that was attacked in the Strip, the Revolutionary Guards are warning that any vessel that deviates from the Iranian corridor will face a decisive response. In Iran, they deny that Iran attacked the Emiratis and threatened a harsh response against the Gulf countries. The spokesman of the Revolutionary Guards made clear that there has been no change in the blockade and that any vessel that violates the Iranian protocols will be stopped by force. The Iranian army also claimed that its navy launched warning missiles towards American military ships that approached the strait and did not respond to the radio calls. The American military does not rely on and does not really know what they're talking about, so there is no confirmation on these reports from the Iranians. And I just want to make something very clear. It seems that everyone is looking at Trump and thinking he's crazy. But you know what is fun about Trump? He threatens the Iranians the same way that the Arabs threaten Israel. It is the same language. They would always say, "We will erase Tel Aviv. We will destroy Israel." He says to them, "We will erase Iran. We will erase the armies. We will erase everything." Even though he has not done that yet, the talk is like in our neighborhood, the Middle East. So it seems that Trump speaks Arabic, or at least the language that is spoken here in this region, in order to deter the other side. And Iran is now at one of its most significant points of weakness during this war, partially because it is struggling to understand how to deal with Trump. The Iranians are now at their weakest point. They do not recognize this boss, Donald Trump. They have no pressure points on him, and he is trolling them and driving them crazy. He jumps from west to east and leaves them with celebrations of fake victory while they remain with the hanging rope around their neck, not knowing what may happen in the near future. It is important to remember that most of the questions focused on when the fire will open again for another intense military phase. But if we look systematically and internally, that war is a variety of efforts, not only military and firepower. And maybe we will actually reach the conclusion that for now, there is no direct reason to do that at this moment. The intense military effort of Israel and the United States has a glass ceiling because there is no intention to occupy Iran, and the Revolutionary Guards could always provoke and continue firing, even only in order to paint it as an unprecedented war of concessions and present it as if they achieved accomplishments against the United States and Israel. We have seen this for years with terrorist organizations. The naval closure on Iran's ports. And it is important to remember that the matter is not only Hormuz. So this naval closure on the Iranian ports is choking Iran, and it is very disturbed by the loss of income, the raging inflation of prices of everything that they need to buy in this country, and the approaching of an inability to take care of the state and its citizens, not to mention its security forces. And at the same time, the inability to expose is leading a significant shortage of oil because they cannot export their oil stocks and supplies to the world. So the storage sites will soon lead to a closure of all the oil wells, And this is a problematic and irreversible step in the short term because of contamination and other complications. And the regime in Tehran is under pressure, which it hides with many propaganda attempts and a war of consciousness against the United States. The pressure is not from a military campaign, but actually from popular protests that will begin again because of the situation. The proof is that the past 2 weeks, the pace of the executions of detainees from the protests last January has greatly increased, and apparently because of the need to deter the renewal of the protests. By the way, against the background of the reports about protests in Iran and widespread internet disruptions affecting daily life in the country, the Iranian commentators in recent days published a sharp comment on X, referring both to the possibility of increasing the pressure on the regime and to the heavy civilian price for the internet shutdowns. Look, Trump hinted yesterday at arming the Iranian people. This is the right idea. It requires time, planning, and infrastructure. If Washington decides to advance such a strategy, plans it seriously, does the paperwork correctly, and keeps its messages consistent, recruiting people into the streets and activizing the defections within the regime's security apparatus, this situation can become completely possible. Therefore, it would be right to stop standing with the stopwatch, the one that has been in the hands of the best commentators and broadcasters since the first day of Roaring Lion. The strategy of an effective naval closure is very powerful. It chokes the regime, which also has to run a state and not only a terrorist organization, and creates exactly the conditions needed to bring it down. But it requires more time. It would be right to start adopting again the systematic logic of bringing down the regime. It is possible, and it is also the only thing that the Iranian regime fears more than any military effort against it. The renewal of popular protests against it will also occupy it in the internal arena, and it is likely that it will pay less attention to what's happening in Hormuz and in the external arena at the point of a popular uprising of the Iranian people themselves against the regime. So yes, all the news commentators today are asking the question, how long will this continue? And what else needs to be done? I think it would be the right stop to stand with the stopwatch and asking when, because that is what the best people around the world are asking. What's happening with Epic Fury? When will it stop? When will this war end? And they are only creating panic and confusion. The strategy of the naval closure is very effective. It is choking the regime, which has to both run a state and fight the greatest military power in the world. And this situation is creating exactly the conditions needing to bring it down. But it turns out that this requires more time. Moreover, the hope is that it has already been understood that the current regime is not a negotiation partner and will not allow either a new regional order or American hegemony. The two supreme goals of the United States in general and against China in particular, and also, therefore, there is now a practical opportunity that it would be right to turn the entire campaign into stages, to join the popular campaign with a complementary military effort that will seal the ability of a popular uprising from within. So yesterday, Marco Rubio made clear who is responsible for the escalation in Lebanon. And it is definitely not Israel. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio blamed Hezbollah and Iran for the escalation in the north, made clear that Lebanon itself is a victim of the organization, and called for a permanent arrangement that will include disarmament. And in New York, an angry pro-Palestinian mob surrounded a synagogue in Manhattan. Dozens of anti-Israel protesters clashed with police forces near the Park East Synagogue in Manhattan during the protests against an event that was promoting real estate in Israel that was held in that location. The protesters shouted, "Death to America, death to Israel," tried to break through the police barriers, chanted inciting slogans, and caused the injury of one police officer. We will soon bring you all the details about all the incomprehensible anti-Semitism that's happening in America. Sometimes there is a feeling that there is a group of people in the United States that does not know how to appreciate the standard of living and the freedom that they have. Every person of faith knows that nothing in this world can be taken for granted. So there's a lot ahead of us. So let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. And we are here to bring you the whole truth about what's happening in the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. And most importantly, do not forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get our personal perspective of what it's like to live in Israel under this war. Our senior Middle East affairs correspondent, Mati Shoshani, is Trump's decision to suspend Project Freedom really an American retreat or a calculated move that gives Iran one more moment before a decision?
Well, Yair, I don't think it's either, honestly. The operation was made to make a point. We were talking about this earlier. You know, sometimes it seems like Trump's actions are, well, they're done in spontaneity, let's put it that way, without much thought. But it seems that here there was a point to this entire operation, and the point was to make a visual, a public, a military, a financial example of, can Iran stop the Americans? Yes or no? And the answer after this operation is a resounding, is a clear yes. Clearly, Iran can't stop U.S. ships from traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. Clearly, evidently, obviously, the U.S. is able to accompany other ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. And I believe the goal behind much of this operation was psychological. It's here in the head. And I heard someone brilliant explain this the other day. If someone said to me or you, Yair, hey, you have a 95% chance to succeed in getting through and 5% of failing. Well, you'd say, well, I'll take the 95%.
Yeah,
if you
sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good. If you captain a ship and the answer is you have a good chance of getting through, or your ship sinks to the bottom of the ocean and it will take you 2 years to collect the insurance money. If you get them, meaning your company goes bankrupt from this, you don't go. And so much of this is psychological. Much of this has to do with public perception. And the Trump administration made a public show of, we want everyone to see that the Iranians can't stop us. We want it to be visual. We want it to be visible. We want it to be clear that when we say we're going to move a ship through the Strait of Hormuz, no Iranian mine, no speedboat, no drone, no missile will be able to stop us coming in and coming out under the Iranian nose. And I want to make it clear, that's exactly what they did. The Iranians threw at those American ships everything they had. We're talking hundreds of projectiles, small drones, big drones, speedboats of different sizes with different colors of rubber and different munitions on them. I mean, anything you can imagine was thrown at these ships. And according to the Americans, not a single one of those many projectiles actually hit those ships. This adds to statistics we've heard in the past, leaked by no other than President Trump, who said that in a single day, one of the USS carriers that was in the Gulf sustained, I think it was 113 missiles and drones in a single day, and not a single one of them was able to hit that ship. Just to show you how effective the countermeasures the US carries are. So this was an example. Watch what we're able to do. Watch what we are able to sustain. Watch as we show that the Iranians' threat is not as big as it necessarily needs to be. Was it successful? I think that only days will show us. The fact that the Iranians are once more, this seems to be like a every other day kind of occurrence, once more saying, look, it looks like we are moving towards an agreement, things are doing better, we're all friends again. it's hard to know at this point, but the plan is at least that this will push towards an agreement, that this will push towards a public perception that the Iranians can be defeated in blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and that the Americans can be trusted. This goes a long way. I mean, think about the amount of coverage this received in reinstating the faith in the American ability to really protect its assets and other ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. I'll admit and end with this, which it's obvious and clear that they're not going to be able to do this for every ship, but that it is possible when needed.
So can you explain to me what's happening right now with the U.S. blockade on the Iranian ports? Is that still continuing? So that's the method to choke them economically? What's going on with that? And then also, if you can elaborate and talk about the rearmament and bringing weapons to the Kurds and the Iranian opposition.
Yeah, so on the side of, oh, hold on. If ever there's a question of if it's live or not, someone insists on call. Someone insists on calling.
The same one, the same Segev.
No, this was someone different. Insists on calling on WhatsApp, so it rings on my computer. Anyway, to your point, Yael, on the blockade on Iran. Yes, the U.S. continues its blockade of Iranian ships. The Iranians have attempted to circumvent that blockade, and according to certain reports and certain satellite images, have been limited in their success. I'm being very careful with what I say, because it looks like they've been able to take oil from Iranian ships and move it onto other nationalities' ships, and then move them with the U.S.'s knowledge, not necessarily permission. This is not today. This is in past days, in recent days. That's one thing. But yes, the blockade continues. The blockade is carrying out a very substantial financial effect. Where do you know that the blockade is working? When you hear ridiculous statements from the Iranian regime. Let me give you an example. Iran says, look, we fooled the Americans. We are now able, they closed the sea. But little did they know, we have train tracks. So now we are moving oil via train east and north. Sadly, the US knows and everyone else knows that moving oil that way is highly ineffective, expensive, and also far away from the clients that need to receive this oil for the Iranians. And they're only able to move very small amounts per day. Iran is actually entering an entirely different problem that isn't even related to money at this point. They have a problem where you can't just stop production from an Iranian. I'm sorry. Let me put my laptop.
Yeah, exactly. From an Iranian. This is something that I learned also in this war, that you cannot just stop the production of an oil well, because once you stop it, the pressure changes inside, water is leaking and entering the mix and diluting the oil. And then in order to restart it, it's harder to do it, right?
It takes time and money. And then really that's the issue. There's a way, if you can see satellite images, they'll show you how high oil storage silos are filled. Sort of the lid goes up and down with the oil level. It's clear the Iranians are running out of space to store their oil. There's different estimates. One said it was supposed to happen today, another said it's happening in 3 days. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. Let's say we're within a week of the Iranians running out of space to store oil. We've seen satellite imagery of the Iranians trying to hide oil or store oil in these ancient tankers that they've pulled out of, some hidden bay somewhere because they have nowhere to put the oil. They're hoping, and this is really connecting to the Iranian financial side, their hope is that this ends fast enough for them to be able to export oil. There's a financial element to it of being able to make money again, but also, as you mentioned, and filled in for me there when my phone was ringing once more, their hope is that it happens before they have long-term damage to their wells. The Iranians have publicly said in recent weeks that they know how to fix it, but look, if the Americans, the Canadians, and every other country on the world that produces oil at scale says it's a huge problem, I'm going to take their word from it and not think that the Iranian engineers have outsmarted everyone else who makes oil or produces oil in the world. They have a financial problem. They have an issue. And as to your second question on the, let's call it the other factions that we were expecting to rise up and fight against the Iranian regime, we haven't seen them materialize yet. There have been rumors, there have been images, there have been videos leaked, but in reality, the Ayatollah regime, the IRGC, are controlling Iran. in reality, the only substantial amount of what we would call opposition forces that was pushing against the Iranian regime, or into Iran, I should say, was pro-Iranian militias from Iraq. We haven't seen the substantial movement of Kurdish rebels. We haven't seen the substantial amount of any one of the many minorities within Iran. And we know from multiple sources that the United States and other entities have tried to equip and to pay and to coerce these entities to fight against them, but it simply isn't working. And that's the reality we're dealing with right now, where there's a hope, there's an expectation, but we're not there.
Okay, so Mati, how can people pray for the situation?
Well, one, I'd say pray for the people of Iran. They're the ones suffering most over here. And secondly, pray for the government to be changed there. And of course, pray for the leadership. Pray for President Trump and his war cabinet. Pray for the people of Israel. Pray for the men and women at arms in our country that are doing diligently, day and night, protecting this country. And of course, the American men and women that are protecting and fighting the world's war in the Middle East right now. That's really what it is. It's the armed forces of the United States people and the Israeli people that are fighting on behalf of the global population against the biggest evil of our time, the Iranian Ayatollah regime. That should be our prayer right now.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Mati Shoshani, for explaining all the situation. Definitely a very, very important day in the war against Iran, and we'll see what happens next, what Donald Trump will do next, and what the Iranians will do next. Thank you so much, Mati. And to all of you that are joining us now, we are TBN Israel. We report every single day here on YouTube, twice since this war started, about what's happening in the war against Iran, about what's happening in the war against Hezbollah, Hamas, and basically everything that affects this region from a biblical perspective from Jerusalem, so that you will know how to pray for the situation. How can you help us? You can hit the subscribe button and you can share this video with as many people as possible, because many Israelis are still juggling their reserve duty while trying to get back to work and handle their day-to-day lives. It's not easy. Your body is tired, your mind is overloaded, and the pressure doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. I have been there, coming home from reserves, trying to be present for my family, catching up at work, while still feeling like I'm in a survival mode. It takes strength, energy, and faith to push through, and that's why I started using Vinia. It's an Israeli supplement made from red grape cells that help improve the blood flow to your heart, your brain, and your muscles. For me, that meant better focus, more energy, and fewer days of that foggy, burnt-out feeling. I started using it during my reserve duty, and I'm still taking it today. I like also the coffee version. You can take it in the morning, or the tea version, and they also have this powder that you mix up in your water, like a very, very refreshing drink. But if you want to give it a try for yourself, you can go to vinyatbnisrael.com. Again, that's vinyatbnisrael.com, or call 800-638-1944. Again, that's vinyatbnisrael.com or 800-638-1944. Faith helped me stay grounded, and Vinya helps me stay sharp. The cargo ship was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz, just as the world was trying to understand whether the war against Iran was truly approaching its end or not. The Revolutionary Guards warned every vessel, anyone who does not pass through the Iranian corridor risks a military response. And in Washington, President Trump is temporarily pausing Project Freedom while keeping the blockade on Iran at full strength. So what is really happening here? Is this the beginning of an agreement, or just a short pause before the next round? I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report on the war between Israel and the United States against Iran and the Revolutionary Guards, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. This night begins in one place, the Strait of Hormuz. It is a narrow passage, crowded, dangerous, and now full of threats. A cargo ship reports an attack. The Revolutionary Guards issue warnings. Commercial vessels wait for instructions. And between the Iranian coast and the coast of Oman, every radar signal, every speedboat, and every drone can turn within seconds into an international incident. The American move was supposed to be clear. Project Freedom was designed to escort the commercial ships that were trapped in the Persian Gulf after Iran turned Hormuz into its main bargaining chip. The United States opened a secure maritime route, deployed forces, activated aircrafts, and sent a simple message to Tehran. This strait will not become the property of the Revolutionary Guards. But then Trump did what Trump often does. He changed the pace. Only 2 days after the operation began, the president announced a short pause. According to him, the request came from Pakistan and other countries, while major progress was being made towards an agreement with Iranian representatives. But he emphasized one important point. The naval blockade on Iran's ports remains in force. This is not a full retreat. This is a pause with a gun still on the table. Iran rushed to celebrate, of course. The regime's propaganda outlets declared that Trump had surrendered, that the United States had failed, and that the Revolutionary Guards had succeeded in deterring the American Navy. But we must be careful with that picture. The regime, under heavy economic pressure, must sell its public a victory, even when, in reality, it is still being choked. Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained it sharply. Operation Epic Fury, the direct American pause against Iran, the Operation Freedom, it's over. Its objectives were achieved. The United States prefers the path of peace. But at the same time, Rubio says that the blockade on Iran is costing Tehran up to $500 million a day in lost revenue, and that 90% of Iran's total trade has been stopped. This is not just an economic statistic. This is pressure on the life engine of the regime. Iran needs to sell oil. It needs to hold up its currency. It needs to pay its security forces. It needs to calm citizens, provide water, control the prices, and also preserve the fear in the streets. When ports are blocked, storage tanks are filled, and oil wells may be forced to shut down, the regime does not feel only a military threat. It feels a threat to its ability to function. And this is exactly where Hormuz enters the story. Tehran understands that if it loses the ability to threaten the passage of global oil, it will be left with very few cards. That is why it is not satisfied with firing weapons. It is trying to create a control mechanism, an official mechanism, an email address, a passage instructions, an Iranian corridor that includes licenses, advanced coordination, and everything that it needs to control the strait. It looks bureaucratic, but in reality, it's a military move wearing a civilian suit. Iran is telling ships, do not pass where the Americans tell you to pass. Pass only where we approve. And if you deviate, the Revolutionary Guards will respond. This is exactly why this event is so dangerous. The moment each side draws a different map, one civilian ship can find itself between two conflicting systems of command. The Americans can say that they are not looking for a confrontation. Rubio said that fire will only happen if they are fired upon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that ceasefire is still holding, but on the ground, ships are burning, forces are patrolling, and American aircraft are in the air around the strait. In images released by United States Central Command, F-16 aircraft were seen in the area. On those aircraft, APKWS rockets were visible. Simple Hydra rockets upgraded with laser guidance. This is a very important weapon in this arena because it allows forces to intercept cheap drones without wasting missiles that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. The detail says a lot about the nature of this war. Not every threat comes from a ballistic missile. Sometimes it is a speedboat. Sometimes it is a small drone. Sometimes it is a naval mine. Sometimes it is a launch from the coast. And sometimes it is only a radio warning interrupted by the other side as an immediate threat. In the Persian Gulf, there is not much room for mistakes. And at the same time, the United States and the Gulf states are advancing a draft resolution at the United Nations Security Council to protect freedom of navigation in Hormuz. And Rubio said that the proposal was prepared together with Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar. It demands that Iran stop attacking ships, stop leaving naval mines, and stop trying to collect passage fees. This is important. This is an important diplomatic point. If Trump pauses the operation for a few days, it does not necessarily mean that he's leaving the arena. He's building another arena: military pressure at sea, economic pressure at the ports, diplomatic pressure at the United Nations, regional pressure with the Gulf states. And the Iranians understand this. That is why they are applying pressure somewhere else: the United Arab Emirates. The recent attacks on the Emiratis create a deep shock across the Gulf. Ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones were launched towards the country. A fire broke out on an oil facility in Fujairah. 3 Indian workers were wounded. Schools were closed. Flights were disrupted. Citizens received alerts. A country built on stability, commerce, ports, aviation, and an image of security found itself under direct Iranian fire. It is not a coincidence that Fujairah was hit. Fujairah sits outside the Persian Gulf. It is important because it allows parts of the energy movements to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran wants to show that even the bypass route is not immune, it will try to strike exactly there, not to conquer, not to win militarily, but to frighten the insurance companies, the ship owners, the investors, and the governments. In simple words, Iran does not need to sink every ship. It needs to make enough people believe that the passage is no longer worth the risk. But the attack on the Emiratis could backfire on Tehran. Across the Gulf, there is now a feeling of abandonment. Some countries are asking whether Washington really intends to protect them, or only use them as part of the pressure on Iran. In Abu Dhabi, voices are calling on the Americans to act. The message is clear: if Iran attacks America's partners and does not pay a price, it will learn that escalation works. Israel is leading this map carefully. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the President of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed, and according to reports, Israel has deepened security cooperation with the Emiratis and even deployed an Iron Dome system there with an Israeli team. If those reports reflect reality, this is a deep regional shift. Israel no longer only defends itself against Iran, it is becoming part of a regional defense system against the same enemy. And that's exactly what Iran tried to prevent. Since October 7th, Tehran has invested enormous efforts in isolating Israel. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq and Syria. But as the war continues, more countries in the Middle East understand that the Iranian threat is not only an Israeli problem. It is a problem for ports, airports, oil pipelines, trade routes, and every government that wants to run a stable country. And before we continue, if this report helps you understand what's really happening in the Middle East, do not only remember that the headlines count. What count is the truth and the details. So, if you want to help us reach more people and you like this report, make sure to subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube. You can share this with friends, with family, and anyone who needs to know what's happening without filters. And the best thing that you can do in order to never miss an update of Boots on the Ground is to subscribe and hit this little bell on YouTube so that you stay with us. Because this war is being fought on the ground, at sea, in the air, and in the media, and also in the spiritual realm. So we need to help each other by praying for the situation and understanding the truth. And now we need to move into the internal arena inside Iran, because behind the threats of the Revolutionary Guard, there is a regime under real pressure. not only from aircrafts, not only from the blockade, also from the Iranian street. Reports from inside Iran point to economic steps that show just how difficult the situation has become. Tiny credit amounts on food vouchers for the Iranian people, wartime birth grants that amount to almost symbolic sums, low compensation ceiling for war victims in Tehran, water rationing, inflation, disrupted internet, and above all, the regime's fear of renewed public protests. And at the same time, the pace of executions of detainees from previous protests is increasing. This is not only cruelty, this is a method. A regime that fears the street tries to get ahead of it through terror. It tells the citizens, think twice before you go out. But sometimes, when fear becomes too visible, the public understands that the regime is no longer sure of itself. Trump was asked about the possibility of arming protesters against the regime. He said that people in Iran want to protest, but when they faced armed men who shoot them between the eyes, it is hard to stay in the street. That is a sharp sentence. It's not an official policy, but it reveals a direction of thought, not only an attack from the outside, but pressure from within. That is the big question of the campaign now. Should the next intense military phase be rushed, or should the blockade, the economy, the internal fear, and the protests be allowed to do their work? The military effort has a glass ceiling. There is no American or Israeli intention to conquer Iran. Therefore, even after a major strike, the regime can survive. Fire a few missiles, film smoke, and tell its public that it won. We saw this method with Hamas, we saw it with Hezbollah. Now we are seeing it in Tehran. The blockade works differently. It does not give one dramatic image like an explosion at a base. It does not always create a headline of elimination or a strike, but it applies pressure every day. It closes the revenue streams. It disrupts the trade. It burdens the economy. It makes the security apparatus ask whether it will have money, fuel, equipment, and salaries next month. War is not only fire. War is also time. And this is exactly where Trump confuses the Iranians. On the one hand, he threatens in a language that they understand. If Iran reaches a nuclear weapon, he says Israel and the Middle East would disappear, and then Iran would turn towards Europe and the United States. He describes the Iranian leadership as a group that must not be allowed to possess nuclear weapons. On the other hand, he leaves an opening for an agreement, pauses an operation, and announces that talks are moving forward. The Iranians do not know where to place him. He does not behave like a classic American president. He does not always move in the straight line. He applies pressure, stops, threatens, smiles, threatens again, and then talks about a deal. In the Middle East, sometimes uncertainty itself becomes a tool. Tehran likes predictability and predictable opponents. Trump does not give in to that. That's not him. But there is also a risk. If the Gulf states feel that they are paying the price of the war without an American response, they may lose trust. If Iran understands that attacks on the Emiratis do not bring a harsh response, it may try again. And if another ship is hit in Hormuz, oil markets and insurance companies will react faster than diplomats. That is why the coming days are critical. Israel and the United States are coordinating their moves. The American ambassador to Israel met with Prime Minister Netanyahu on an unusual day. In Israel, the assessment is that the attacks on the Emiratis were led by the Revolutionary Guards and that not all senior figures in the Iranian regime supported this move. That's important. If there are disagreements inside Tehran, it can explain the zigzag, the threats on one side, denials on the other, firing on one side, and a desire to continue negotiations on the other. Inside Iran, too, there is a struggle over direction. The military wing wants to preserve deterrence. The diplomatic wing wants to extract concessions. The Revolutionary Guards need to show that they were not broken. and the entire establishment needs to prevent the street from understanding that the regime is weaker than it looks. In the north, the Lebanese arena has not disappeared. Marco Rubio said clearly that the problem between Israel and Lebanon is not Israel, and it is not Lebanon. The problem is Hezbollah. The organization operates from Lebanese territory, hides amongst the population, fires towards Israel, and then brings an Israeli response that harms Lebanon. Rubio emphasized that the Lebanese government needs not only the will, but also the ability to disarm Hezbollah. This is a direct connection to Iran. Hezbollah is not only a Lebanese organization, it is an Iranian arm, just like Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the Houthis in Yemen, and the militias in Iraq. When Iran is pressured in Hormuz, it can try to divert the fire to the north. That's why Israel cannot look only at the Gulf. It must keep one eye on Lebanon, on Syria, on Iraq, on Yemen, on Gaza, and on the Israeli home front. Germany is now also entering the picture. The German foreign minister said, alongside the foreign minister Gideon Sa'ar, that Germany is ready to take responsibility after the war ends and participate in protecting the Strait of Hormuz. This is not happening tomorrow morning, but the statement itself matters. Iran wanted to turn Hormuz into a pressure tool against America. It may discover that its move is turning Hormuz into a much broader international issue. Sa'ar said that anyone who sees how this regime behaves towards its neighbors understands why it must not be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. And that brings us back to the basic point. Hormuz matters. Oil matters. The Emiratis matter. Lebanon matters. But above all of it hangs the nuclear question. Trump says that Iran must not obtain nuclear weapons. Rubio says that the operation achieved its objectives, but the diplomatic path must deliver a result. Israel understands that if Iran comes out of this war feeling that it survived, kept its nuclear program, and kept Hormuz, the danger will return even greater. That is why the pause in Project Freedom is not the end of the story. It is a test of Iran, a test of Trump, a test of the Gulf states, a test of Israel. If the agreement advances, we will see heavy American pressure on Tehran to give up its levers of power. If the agreement gets stuck, the blockade will keep working. And if Iran tries to break the game with another round of fire, this short pause may be remembered not as a retreat, but as the final moment before a new chapter opened. The Iranian regime wants the world to see it as the side controlling the peace. But the reality is more complex. It is choking a maritime route because it is being economically choked itself. It is threatening the Gulf states because it struggles to confront the United States directly. It is talking about victory because it needs to hide the internal fear. And here something simple must be said. In the Middle East, sometimes the declaration of victory comes from the weakest place. Those who are confident in their strength do not need to celebrate after every tactical pause. Those who rush to declare that the enemy has failed are often trying to, first of all, convince themselves. This night ends with an attacked ship, a half-blocked strait, a paused American operation, a blockade that remains in force, and an Iranian regime trying to look stable while the ground around it is moving. If the agreement fails, the question will no longer be whether the fighting returns, but who will give the first reason to open fire again. So keep spreading the truth. Follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to click on the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots in the Ground. You can also keep looking for us on social media platforms. Look for Yair Pinto and for Mati Shoshani to see the behind the scene of this war. And the best thing that you can do in this war is to pray. When you pray, pray for wisdom to our leaders. Pray for them to make the right decisions that involve all of our lives. Pray for the enemies of Israel and your enemies. I know it's hard. Believe me, I know it's hard. But God told us to pray for them. Let's pray for them not to succeed in attacking us or in their schemes. Let's pray for them to come closer to His will, to His heart, for Him to affect their hearts. Pray for the children. Pray for those that are affected traumatically by this war. Pray for the family unit in Israel that is under attack because of so many days of separation between husbands and wives due to this war. And keep praying.